I often say participants learn more from each other than they ever learn from me as the facilitator. My job, though, is to create the space for those discussions to come up. I find that so beautiful and important. That's where the rich learning happens in the transformation in those debriefs.
Welcome to another day, another workshop. Excited to introduce our next guest, Romy Alexandra. She's a learning experience designer and facilitator with a passion for creating engaging human-centered learning spaces. With over 15 years of experience in 85 different countries, Romy specializes in experiential learning, psychological safety, and the neuroscience of learning. She's worked with clients such as the United Nations, Netflix, the Formula One teams, and other teams to grow and thrive. Without further ado, let's welcome Romy.
Hello, hello. Thank you so much for that warm welcome. So excited to have this chat with you today.
Me too. So Romy, next to this amazing description of yourself, if you could describe yourself like in one or two lines, what would you say?
Yes, I would say I am definitely a very passionate person. I would not be able to do what I do if I wasn't passionate and if it wasn't really my purpose. I'm on a mission to humanize workplaces and learning spaces. I'm all about bringing humanness more even into the most high performance, even into the most technical areas. There's always space for humanness. And I think I even bring more of my humanity as well.
Wow, that's indeed a beautiful purpose. And I think to make this connection and for our audience to not lose them right away, what is learning experience design?
I think what's so great about it is that there's so many different ways you can describe it. Since the title of your podcast is another workshop, when I think about learning experience design, it's really being intentional in how you design any kind of learning experience, an event. One of the best definitions that I've found is from one of my wonderful friends and colleagues, Jenny 𝗖𝗵𝗽𝗀. And she says that experience design is the empathetic and strategic process of creating transformational experiences built on meaningful connections and collaborative learning. And I love it because it really shows that duality between being very strategic, but also very empathetic to human needs. It requires transformation, right? No one should leave an event the same way they entered. If some change or transformation has not happened, then we haven't designed it appropriately. And of course, it's really built on that connection and collaborative learning. So when I think about learning experience design, it's really bringing in all of those different facets. And it's very much in line with experiential learning, which is really the root of everything I do. And David 𝗖𝗵𝗽𝗀, who's the founder of the theory or the father of experiential learning, if you will, he says in a very similar way, learning is the process whereby knowledge is created through the transformation of experience, right? You need to have experience. You need to have some kind of transformation in order for learning to really take shape. Those are the definitions I really use in the work that I do.
We said it in the beginning, and this is why also you're host of this podcast, is that you facilitate a lot of sessions. How do you see the link with facilitation and learning experience design? Do people need to learn something when they are in a workshop?
Facilitation comes into play after you've designed, right? So for me, I always have to focus first on the really intentional design of any workshop before then I feel ready to facilitate it and deliver it appropriately. Now, you mentioned, do people really need to learn? Because you're right that there are many different kinds of workshops. Sometimes I lead workshops for teams that are really just to help empower them how they brainstorm so they can innovate. Still, I would argue that there's learning there because we're bringing the wisdom into the room to really bring as many ideas forward. So we're learning together what kind of innovative new ideas we're going to take forward. Sometimes, right, you might facilitate a workshop that's more, maybe it feels like, okay, we're creating a plan. It's strategic planning workshop. Still, I would argue that learning is happening there because by the end of it, we're going through the learning cycle, which is we would have an experience, we would reflect on it. We'd really be able to take those outcomes to say, okay, what are all those strategic points we want to make sure we hit so we can put them into action, create that action plan and take it forward. That is really the four modes of learning that our brain naturally learns through is by experience, reflection, generalization, that thinking phase, drawing conclusions so that we can take action forward.
if I react to this example of the strategic planning workshop, don't you think it's too ambitious in the same time to be able to deliver this strategic plan and also like get these learnings and people learn from that experience?
So I think there's a really important distinction here. As human beings, we learn from experience. As I said, every day in our life we're experiencing. And in fact, if you're interested right after this, I would love to do a little mini experience with you. But just to finish answering your question, sometimes bringing in experiential learning in the design doesn't necessarily mean I need to curate a shared experience in the room. It also can mean that I'm honoring the experiences that everyone has already had. That experience, that life experience people are bringing into the room so we can talk about it. So you can really design experiences that are shared, that have never happened before in the workshop, but you also can be really intentional about honoring their lived experience, which I don't think enough people also do. And that can save time, right? You still need to bring in experiences, but how you intentionally design it can be more or less time.
I love that. And I'm also surprised that we're going to do a small experiment. I was not aware of that. No, it's great so that people can really understand what it is. And to be honest, it will also be the first time for me. So you will have a live reaction to that small experiment.
Exactly. So I really appreciate your willingness to try something a little bit outside of the box. I think instead of me now going into what is an experience, I'd first like to really have you experience it. And I would encourage anyone who's listening to this podcast, if you have it available to you, you can feel free to get a pen and one piece of paper. If you're walking, if you're just listening to the podcast, no worries. You don't need any other materials. Just really listen to the instructions and you can still listen and experience on the go. Are you ready, Mehdi? Yeah?
I'm ready. Let's play the first.
So first, I would like to ask you, do you have a piece of paper?
Yes, Perfect. I have.
Okay, great. So I'm going to ask you to fold it twice so that you get 4 different quadrants on paper. Don't worry. They're not going to test you which way you folded it. I just want you to fold it twice so that eventually you have 4 distinct quadrants on the piece of paper. When you have that, you can open it up and let me know. It kind of looks like this.
So half of what we have in a crazy 8.
Yes, exactly. Half of the crazy 8. Perfect. Okay, great. Do you have pen? Do you have some markers, some colors, anything around you?
I have a Sharpie. I have some markers for my son. It's only the colors he doesn't like.
Wonderful. Okay, so here's what I'm going to do. In a moment, we're going to play 4 different songs, each, sometimes 30 seconds to 1 minute long each. And what I really want you to do is listen to the song and really listen for any kind of emotions that are evoked. What comes up for you? What's the feeling? And if you want, you can put that in some kind of image in one of the quadrants. So there's 4 songs for 4 quadrants. This is not about your drawing skills. It doesn't mean that you need to draw something super concrete, abstract. It doesn't need to make sense. It's really about drawing the essence of what is the feeling or sensation you get with this song. If someone who is listening does not have any paper or pen, I invite you to really just close your eyes if you can and really take in the song, because I work with neuroscientists who say we listen better actually when our eyes are closed and we're not looking, and see what comes up for you. Any questions before we play the first song?
No, super clear. So I have a paper, so I will draw what I feel. Yeah. And people would just close their eyes and think about those emotions based on the songs.
Exactly. Yeah. Go ahead. Let's play the first one.
All right. Let's go.
You can write any words as well if you want.
All right.
Thank you. You can also write any words that maybe came up in case there's some feelings, sensations, or words that emerge for any reason. Okay,
Do I share them now?
No,
we move.
No, we're going to move to the next one. So let's play the next one and do the same thing.
I'm the worst participant ever.
No, you're great. I love the questions. There's no way to do this wrong. Don't worry. Okay, thank you. And any words, sensations, any others before we go to the next one? Okay, let's do it.
All right, let's go.
Great. You know the drill. And I think we're ready for the last one.
All right.
Okay. Thank you so much to you and anyone who's listening for engaging in this little mini experience. So first, before you show me your picture, before you show me anything, I would just like to know from you, 𝗵𝗽𝗍, how was that emotional journey that you went on? Because I always say to my participants, I don't care if you tell me I hated that was so uncomfortable, or if you say I loved it, that was really interesting, or anything in between, as long as it's your honest, emotional reaction. So how was that for you?
All right. It was okay, I think. It's not I hated it. I didn't love it either. I think it's confronting because I'm on the spot, Mm-hmm. I guess for the good sake of the experiment, I need to have something to share. But yeah, and also what was interesting is like changing your opinion based on the different music. Ooh. Like, I thought this, but this is even more. Yeah. And I really try to, I don't think I'm the type, it's not the type of thing that I do. I don't meditate and stuff like that or think about my feelings. But I guess people that do that are more comfortable with such exercise. But still, I took the time to really try to find the emotions behind every music.
Okay, thank you. So I'm hearing maybe it was a little different. It might have been a little uncomfortable. It was also revealing in different ways that you thought maybe you had found an emotion, but then a different one made you, question that. Mm-hmm. But it sounds like it was definitely a new experience, not something you typically do, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, great. Thank you so much for sharing. So now, if you're up for it, I would love to see and hear what kind of pictures, images, emotions came up. I also did one as well.
That's good.
Remember, there's no right or wrong. It's about your experience, what you heard and felt.
everyone knows I'm a great artist, so I draw very well. But this time, like, it was not coming.
Yeah, let's see.
So those are like, I just
Ooh.
wrote some words and sometimes use some color.
Nice. Okay, great. I used pencil here, but I had like different lines and some words. Thanks. Thank you for tapping in.
I think we have a good échantillon of what you can have in sessions.
Yeah. Maybe you want to just go through from 1, 2, 3, 4. What kind of sensations or emotions did you find or pinpoint?
So the first one I had like, I don't know if it's not even an emotion, but it's like being patient. Like you have this feeling of time. It was going slowly, and then, you know, the music went up, and it's like you need to wait. Okay. In times, you know, when you're, I don't know, in hard times, or you're working on something very hard, you know, you need to be calm and patient, and then it's going to get better with time, and you're going to get there.
Ooh,
and which is like how I ended, like with the music. Like I was starting to get excited. Like it's almost the finish line.
Interesting. I wrote down for the first one things like mysterious or curious or unsure, but I also had this sentiment of moving upward. Like I was using arrows to try to say like there's some upward motion here I can't quite figure out. So that's really interesting. Great. Tell me more.
So the second one, I think it was a bit like cringe music. You know, I was like, oh, I felt stress, like anxiety. But then, you know, like because of the beat, then it was up and down.
I had the exact same thing. Yeah, I had stressed, anxious, nervous, and I had up and down images here.
I had the feeling at the end it was getting better. Like, I don't know, because of the speed but I would say the feeling is like overwhelming. I was overwhelmed. Like, you know, in life when I have too much thing I cannot follow.
Totally.
Which is like, it happens to me a lot now since my life is a mess.
Oh, that's something we could dive into, but I'm not going to ask you about that yet. Thank you for sharing. How about the other two?
You see how good she is, Romy? Like she's keeping the barrier between the participants and the facilitator. So the third one, it was about being calm, serenity. It's typically the thing that you have like, this is how I imagine people doing yoga, you know, they have this type of music, or people that are meditating.
Yeah.
So yeah, it gives me this serenity.
I also had the same. I wrote calm, peaceful, smooth, and I wrote aligned. Unlike my other quadrants where there kind of were so many lines in different directions, I felt like we were on one clear path, and it was very much together.
It's the same rhythm, and I feel that.
Nice. And last but not least, how about quadrant number 4?
This is the only time I used another color because the music was very exciting. So I had this feeling like of being motivated. So like, let's go, something big is coming. It's typically the type of music you will have like almost in a motivational speech, you know, like Tony Robbins could have started like, go get this thing.
Yes, I wrote like happy, upbeat, and I felt also this kind of, again, this journey upwards, a lot of the upward motion for different ones. But here I felt like we were on a mountain, and I have these like hands helping each other and supporting each other to get up the mountain, thinking like, yeah, there's something coming in there, a little bit of the motivation that you mentioned, that Tony Robbins vibe. So I definitely feel a lot of that. Thank you so much for sharing more about this.
No, that's great. Thanks for the experiment, Romy.
So there's many debrief questions I could ask you to dive in based on what was the intention of the experience. But since we're on a podcast talking about learning experience design and facilitation in general, I want to ask you, what connections do you make between what we just did and learning experience design? Or why do you think I would use this experience as a way to also dive deeper into aspects of designing workshops or facilitating workshops? Again, there's no right or wrong answer. What comes up for you?
So I think what was interesting is that first it was an experience because instead of you telling me something, like you make me live something, like I was listening, so using one of my sense. And then you asked me a question. So I needed to reflect based on the experience I was living. Like when, I don't know, when you facilitate creativity workshop, this is the type of techniques you use because you want to take people somewhere else. So for me, it was like Yeah, it was also very nice to be in that position. It's been a while. So yeah, I think like trying to have the participant be in the driving seat almost before having any task first, or I don't know.
Amazing. I mean, I just had to write them down so I don't forget. So many rich outcomes here that I want to just touch upon what I heard from you, because this for me is why I love debriefing, because I always say that we all could have the exact same experience, but we will all have totally different takeaways. And so hearing you say that, I might have had something totally different in my mind. In fact, I could have gone on a whole thing about the power of music and how, music evokes a lot of emotions and they're kind of the soundtrack to our lives that we don't realize, but also what kind of music you use in your workshops, how that influences. You could also go deep into, there's so many things, but I want to really touch upon what you mentioned, which I love, which was you mentioned asking questions. And this is actually one of my design principles: ask first and then tell. It's really hard to encourage critical thinking skills if we're just coming in and telling our participants what it is. It doesn't matter what the session is. You mentioned creativity. Sometimes we start sessions with definitions, right? Creativity is XYZ. We actually have a missed opportunity for long-term memory retention if we haven't given participants the opportunity to first think for themselves. What does creativity mean to me before you tell me whoever's genius definition you want to use? That's why I always say ask first and then tell. It's the same way with experiential learning. I want you first to experience something before we then go in and tell.
First ask before, like you want people to reflect. You want them to think, and then something can come, right?
Exactly. Asking first and then tell, because we, even for creativity, I would first ask people, come up with your own creative definitions. I love to say creativity to me is finding a parking space in the center of Rome, or creativity to me is finding something to wear when I haven't done my laundry that week.
Okay.
There's so many different ways that people can then put themselves in their experiences into the topic that also has them thinking critically, even if it's also very technical. What is my definition in a very technical way, not a creative way? So I always say ask first, then tell. You also mentioned about the newness. There was something about having a new experience. And that's really at the essence of what an experience actually is. I think this term is so often misused. Everything is an experience now, right? In business, marketing, we're creating experiences, not just marketing out. I was like, okay, hold on. But do we really know what an experience is? I always like to go back to, again, experiential learning theory and David Kolb. And the summary is really about an experience is something new that strikes the learner. It taps into novelty. It taps into emotions. It taps into senses. You need to be present. If you are not fully present or are able to have like your full embodied immersive experience, you're an autopilot. You're doing something else. You're not really able to extract the learning. So some of the reflection you mentioned was this was new. It was different. And I love that because I want to push the mold with my workshops. I want to give people new experiences, particularly, again, I go back to your reference point of creativity. I wanted them to push themselves to do something totally outside the box, because that actually pushes the most innovative ideas to come forward in brainstorming. And then you also mentioned this participant-centered approach, which I think is so important. As facilitators and experience designers, one, we may love to be the designers and being the hosts of these spaces, but if we don't really put ourselves in the shoes of our learners and really tap into that empathy that I mentioned at the beginning, we miss out, or we really don't do justice to the design. So I also have to always, for any design I'm doing, I put myself in the shoes of a participant. I will never ask my participants to do something I haven't done myself. One, because I want to make sure I'm, even in my own way, trying to empathize with their experience to see if it works. But two, because I don't think that it's, let's say, an appropriate way to approach learning is that I'm forcing you to do something I wouldn't be comfortable with, or that I wouldn't try to even role model myself. So many rich learnings I could take away just from your own debrief. And that's why I really love to tap first into experiences, because so many new things came up that we might not have even thought about.
Yeah, I love that. And it reminds me, like, you facilitate a session, right? And you deliver the session, and for some of the participants it was great. For your co-facilitator, it was okay. For you, it was a nightmare. And it's this different perspective. And I can understand like why the debrief is always like so rich.
Yeah. Can I just mention something about that? That is so important, right? We kind of sometimes as facilitators, we go through these motions of checkboxes. Okay, I need an experience. I need a debrief. I need to reflect, but we don't think about it, right? And the value, when we talk about the learning that is transformed through experiences, those debriefs and reflections is where the transformation happens. Because there's so much I could have gone into, and you and I just had the same experience. We found a lot of similarities. I could have also gone deep into many differences we had. And I think sometimes that's the most beautiful part, is when participants can hear from each other their own different reflections. I often say participants learn more from each other than they ever learn from me as the facilitator. My job, though, is to create the space for those discussions to come up. And I find that so beautiful and important. That's where the rich learning happens in the transformation in those debriefs. And also one more way, then I will let you ask me the next question, because you can see I told you I was passionate. I am so passionate about this. The transformation happens not only in the reflection, but also in the action. It's not enough for people to just have an experience, reflect on it. Okay, now we can dive into the theory of learning experience design. If we end there, they'll say, so what? The point of transformation is that people are different when they leave and they're able to take something forward. So I have one last question for you, 𝗵𝗍, which is based on all of the things that we just talked about so far, what came up. Maybe what is one thing that you are taking away from this experience, activity, or reflections, discussions that might actually inform how you design or facilitate workshops in the future?
I had a first discussion with you a couple of months ago to prepare this podcast. And I think it was the takeaway for me, like, how can I start first by asking question? Of course, I ask question in my session, but I mean, like, the first interaction, it was always about me and the goal of the session. Of course, you want to create a connecting moment, a warm-up or an icebreaker. I mean, like, giving them the space to answer, share their opinion about what you're trying to achieve during the session. I think it's great, especially depending of the goal of the session, of course. So if you can afford it, I think this is a game changer in your sessions.
Can you say it one more time? Because I could have thought about different things. I want to make sure I really understood what it was that you're taking away from this that you want to do differently.
So imagine, like, again, we go back to the strategic planning. Let's take example. What I would do normally is that I would don't take a lot of time after the connecting moment. I will jump into the stuff, right? The hard stuff. But then maybe based on news like, hey guys, why do you think we need a strategic plan for this?
Yeah.
What would be the ideal strategic plan that will help you achieve your ambition?
Beautiful. More of that asking first instead of diving straight into the content after.
Right, exactly.
I love that. Thank you for sharing that, because we see this all the time. We have these checkbox. Okay, I know I need to do a quote unquote icebreaker. I would say connection before content. Let's get rid of icebreaker, call it connection before content. But even still, okay, we feel connected. If we go straight into the content, we've missed the opportunity to use the brain and harness the brain and harness the wisdom in the room. Everyone, I would say, no one who walks into your workshop is an empty cup that needs to be filled. Okay, it's time for strategic planning. Let's go. Everyone is actually a full cup of life experience that we can drink from. And so asking those questions first, bringing in their life experience, is actually going to make, when you get to the strategic planning, so much richer.
Now I understand why you were faking the drinking. Like, it was just for this nice metaphor.
No, I always have them near me, but I need to drink anyway. So.
No, I'm just kidding. Like, typically, like, I had a session recently where it was about change and presenting the new plan for this new department. And because of that, it was a huge one, so I couldn't ask. But we did a Menti, and one of the first questions integrated because of our discussion, it was that. Like, why do you think we need to change? Why do we need to change now? What is the biggest reason behind this? Blah, blah, blah.
And I think that's so important, is that we need those questions up front, because we need to know, how are people entering the session? In an ideal world, we've done our surveys, we've done our interviews, we really understand what's happening with the teams that we're working with before they walk into our workshops. But still, sometimes we don't fully understand how they might be feeling. They might be saying, why do we need this? This actually happened to me not too long ago. I got noticed. I flew to another continent to do a workshop, and about 12 hours before the night before, I got a message from the team leader who said, actually, we just got word that the team doesn't want this workshop. So I just want to give you a heads up. It was part of a longer term program and they were freaking out. They were so nervous. Like, we don't know how to tell you. And I said, thank you. I said, this is the best gift you could have given me, is that I'm understanding how people are really feeling entering into the workshop. Let's use that. I don't think it's about me feeling good or that the people need to be participant. No, my job as a learning experience designer always starts with human emotions. Our emotions dictate so much of how we end up showing up in workshops, how we can learn. It's so much woven into learning experience design. Having that understanding of where people were at in their emotional state helped me actually redesign the whole workshop beforehand. And we opened up by saying, let's talk about what are your honest feelings about being here right now. And we created a space for people to say, you know what? We have so much on our plate. We don't have time. We've already covered this topic. We feel like we went so in depth. Why are we here? Right now, we have so many competing demands. So we kind of open it up to the group to make a decision. Do we want to move forward with really just doubling, like the purpose of the second part of the workshop was to go deeper into skill building and practice and feedback. And I said, if you feel like that's not worthy right now of your time, we don't need to do this. I want to create the space that's actually going to help you all in this moment. Ultimately, we tweaked, we adapted, but they said, yes, they wanted the practice. So we went deeper into the areas that they needed. But I think that's what it really means to take a participant-centered approach for your designs, is really tapping into what people want and need and how we can work with and not against that.
It's interesting. Let me react on this.
Okay.
So the way I see it is that my client is the person that asks for my help. I'm trying to understand what is his goals and what he wants to get out of the session. Then you have this, and then your job is to please your client, right? And this is how this is how I see it, is how I make a good work. Of course, I'm a mogul when it comes to experience compared to you, right? But I'm also trying to go big into trying to design something that is different. So of course, I have this goal of pleasing everyone so that they have a great time achieving the goal of my real client. But there's some moments where you cannot have both, in my opinion, especially, again, coming back to those constraints, we have half a day or 2 days to build a strategy. I cannot make it nice and build a strategy. And I've been called to build a strategy. So I will do my best to make it as nice as possible, but it will be hard. It will be some hard work. How do you see this? Because in this example you just shared, you are superhuman. And I understand that, and this is great. And at the end, it was a happy story, right? Because how do you approach this? And it was a very long question.
I think it's a great one. And I think that there's a delicate balance between, as you said, giving your clients what they ask for, what they want, but also giving them what you know that they need, that they might not know that they need. This actually also recently happened, by the way, same client. They stayed with me. I want you to know that just a couple of weeks ago, we were talking about this. They came and they had a new client request. They wanted a training. They had so many topics that they wanted, and they needed it now. They need it quick. They have no time. We had 3 days. And I think within each day, it was expected, 5 or 6 different topics. So I came to them and I said, very honestly, listen, I understand you're telling me you have time constraints, that we need to do this quickly, that all of these topics are important. If I wanted to please them, I would say, sure, no problem, I'm going to do it. But actually, it's not about pleasing, because ultimately, as designers and facilitators, we know what's actually possible. The brain doesn't learn. I would say also, the human brain is not a sponge. We don't learn just by information. If I sat them there for 8 hours to just give them all that information, they wouldn't learn anyway, because the brain is actually more like a tea strainer. What comes out at the end is actually what they've experienced, right? That's why I say experiential learning is how we really make sure that people get the most value of their time, because they remember what they've learned. And yes, that will take some more time to create experiences, to reflect, to then bring in the content. But everything that goes through those cycles of experiential learning will actually remain. So I told the client, listen, we could do this, but we will have to be so surface level with these topics. There's also so many topics that the brain won't retain it. If I did it in this way that you've asked, I won't be able to do justice. I couldn't fully stand behind this. So here's what I would suggest instead. I was like, let's pick from these topics. Can we prioritize which ones feel really important we want to dive deeper into? Which ones we could find a way to embed throughout in different ways? Can we expand the time we have? Or can we, if this is the time, can we find ways to have blended learning? Or can we even have one-on-one coaching? Can we have a follow-up afterwards? So showing them different ways that we could still tackle the same goal, but in a different approach was so enlightening for the client because they realized, oh, right, that's why we hire you, Romy, because you know how people are actually going to maximize the results. We just know this is what we need. So it's really a partnership in that way.
And of course, like when I'm in the room and I hear you imagine like you do a connecting moment where it's also to capture the expectations of the group, and you hear something is like, oh, like there is like big expectations that are almost going into an opposite way to what the main clients want. But then what I would do is just like small break, and I will have a discussion with the decider and see what is possible.
Exactly.
But I've been in a situation where like, no, we stick to the plan. And okay, let's.
It's again, right, the balance between when you go in, when you see the designs, they're so detailed, right, down to the minute. We've looked at what are all the things, but then you have those structures, so you also can have full-on spontaneity based on what emerges in the room. That's why I would say, right, in this debrief, we could have gone in so many different directions depending on what came up for you. You were my participant here, but what comes up in a room full of people, I can still find ways, even if the client says, right, stick to the structure. We need to still do that. Okay, great. Still, I'm going to find ways to embed what you took away. We call this weaving themes of what you took away in the debriefs, because that's where their mind is, right? If your mind is fully on all the things we talked about, ask first, then tell, participant experience, it makes no sense to go into a whole thing about how do you curate the music behind your designs, or how do you bring in emotional, like there's emotional intelligence and facilitation. And there's so many things we could have gone because your brain wasn't there. So we always want to work with the brain. It's how we weave all those pieces together, the structure, but also the spontaneity and those personal responses.
Okay. Thanks, Romy. I want to go back to something you said in the beginning. You explained like the definition of, I think this guy was your mentor, no?
David 𝗖𝗵. Yes, I feel honored to call him a mentor. I'm a faculty member at the Institute for Experiential Learning. So I've worked with the 𝗖𝗵s. Yeah, they are the researchers and theorists who've been going deep into this work for the past 50 years.
I tried to make the introduction of Romy short, but she did so many amazing things that I needed to choose some of them. Yeah, so you said like it needs to be new. It got me thinking, like, what do you mean by that? Because like at the moment, someone else at the moment is like slightly different, even if it's the same idea behind. Will you see this as a new experience or?
Such a good question. Thank you for this. So I'd say that it's novelty, but it's not only novelty, right? So there's many different ways that an experience can be new. Even if we did this exact same thing, but with a group of people, we'd have a totally different experience because you'd have different reactions in the responses. Also because you would be feeling different that day. Who knows? Maybe today you entered into this experience in one emotional state, maybe in another day it's in a different one. But I think also, and there's so many different, even adding like, let's use watercolors instead, or let's use finger painting instead. Like all of those different, even tweaks can add nuance, but they add a whole new element to reflect on. The other thing I think is important to mention is really when we talk about an experience being something new, it's about not being on autopilot. So I always say, right, that if I started your experience by saying, go into a breakout room and introduce yourself, you're on autopilot. That's not something that's new. You do that morning, noon, and night all the time. Hi, I'm Romy. I'm a learning experience designer, I'm a facilitator. Like I actually hate this question. My
purpose is blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, exactly. Right? You're not really tapping into the senses, the emotions, the presence, the embodiment, all of those other pieces that coupled with the novelty really make an experience. And so it doesn't need to always be, like I said, here we did something new that was different, which was great. But you could also we could start our experience, could be a breakout room of us just discussing together, what is your approach for experience design, step by step? What are the 5 steps that you do? it might not be new in your mind because you're like, well, I'm a workshop designer. I do this every day. But the idea of bringing different people together, hearing their different approaches, starting to reflect and think about, how I approach my experience design process versus yours, where the similarities, differences, what new ideas come up, that taps into some novelty and difference than you might usually do.
So I'm sure there is this big book that is quite known in the facilitation industry, The Power of Moments, from the 𝗖𝗵𝗽𝗀𝗀.
Yeah, they're great.
People remember the beginning, the end, and the peak moments. What do you think as an expert in the field? Is it good practice to think like that when you're designing experience, or there are other things that you should consider? And I don't know, maybe they said something that was not true from, I don't know, expertise perspective and studies.
Well, I love this book. I pretty much love everything that the Heath brothers put out. I think it's great. And their epic, or I call it epic, or the acronym that they use for all the different pieces definitely still fall in line with my process, right? They talk about peak moments. And I also even think that it's not just, as you mentioned, how you start and how you end your session. That is really important, because what we know also from neuroscience, I'm fortunate enough to work with a lot of neuroscientists who can confirm that people remember most how you start and how you end a meeting or end a workshop. So that's why it is really important. Sometimes we get very intentional with how we design the beginning, and then we're just like, let's see what happens. Okay, now we need to close. It's like, no, don't just close. Wait, we need to make sure we fully landed. People feel good, that they're ending with some kind of, maybe it's a connection moment I like to end, or the action points, but feeling in a bit more of a pleasant emotional state, because also the brain likes to feel those pleasant emotions. I try to move away from positive and negative emotions, because you can learn from all emotional states, but still more pleasant than unpleasant. But also those peak moments, right? So one thing, again, that I've learned over time that can be really powerful is how do you scaffold so that you're also building up to kind of a pinnacle moment. And I think that's also something I find really interesting is when you start with such a high and it feels really great, but then it kind of goes flat after that, you feel it. You feel it in the energy, you feel it in the room. And so trying to be more intentional, how are we building up those experiences? There may be, if I have time in a workshop to do more experiences, I want to make sure that the second one feels even more experiential. It feels that we're tapping even more into our emotions or our senses or something even new, unique, different than how the first one. That feels like, we're reaching a pinnacle in some way that then we can debrief, reflect, and make sure we take those action steps away, not just for experience sake, but making sure people really have something tangible they can put into practice by the end.
Okay. So I have so many questions to ask you on this. This is the second time you mentioned the importance of the after, which I believe is something that a lot of facilitator almost neglect. I think workshops that don't always succeed in the room, they succeed also after. If nothing happens, it will be a big miss out. What are your tips? What would you advise facilitators to do in the sessions so that there is more chance that those things will happen?
Yes, great point. So the very, very basic thing is just even ask, what are people going to do? Because I think, from every experience, I said you take something away. For you, at the end, you said, well, I want to make sure I'm asking more questions first. Someone else might say something totally different. Okay, so at least make sure we start by asking people what that transformation will be. What are you going to do differently after today? That's pretty much the lowest barrier, but please, because still I see facilitators not asking that. So let's start there. What are you going to do differently? But there's a difference between inspiration and behavior change. And I've been going really deeply trying to also understand how do we ensure those changes actually take place. And some of the lowest hanging fruit of what we can do in a workshop to ensure people put those actions into practice is, one, get really granular on a plan. Don't just say, hey, I'm going to ask more questions first. I could ask you, Mehdi, why don't you look at your calendar right now? Why don't you pinpoint what is the next workshop you're going to do? Why don't we really structure, how are you going to ask? What are those, details? Why is it important to you? In making sure that we're really getting granular and having some kind of action plan, that helps. But also there's so much power in accountability partners. This is one of the most underutilized tool. behavior change, like I've seen so many different research and reports. There were someone who said it just by having accountability partners increases the likelihood that people will actually do it by 40%. Another research report said even up to 70%.
70%. Yeah.
I've seen it
From
all.
the one thing I've seen it.
Yeah, whatever it is, I just say, just do it because it really makes a difference. I see that we hold ourselves accountable to others more than we hold ourselves accountable. So if I will, in a breakout room, then end my session by saying, this is your accountability partner. Share what that action is. Share what your plan is. Put a date in the calendar by when you're going to meet and reflect. It could be a meeting. It could be a WhatsApp text, a Slack message, whatever it is. Decide on your accountability system and a date by when you'll check in to talk about it. And just by doing that, you increase the likelihood that people will do it. And 1/3 or 4th, I'm not sure where I'm
Before
at.
that, what I think is great, because I'm doing the mistake, and because I think that the group that participated to this workshop are accountable buddies. Like, by having, I don't know, a task with an owner, and like they all are responsible for each other. But I love what you just shared. Like, you're taking this further, which I know mine is like, I have a lot of flows. This is such a great tip. Thanks, Romy. I think the person will love that.
I'm thrilled to share it because it makes all the difference, and I've seen it myself. Because one, as you said, I appreciate your perspective, because it's true. We think we're accountable to the group, but no, if nobody's checking in on it, nothing will happen. So it's about having different accountability measures. So one will be your partner and having this personal relationship, but then I, as the designer of the program, will also be really sneaky and also try to insist, let's have a follow-up meeting. So if this workshop, I'm really trying to move away from one-off workshops now, because I just see that it's harder to have that accountability mechanism in. Again, sometimes clients need it and they want it, and I'll give it to them, but I'm very clear upfront and said, if you really want behavior change, then can we at least at the very minimum have 1-2 months where we decide by when is the deadline, by when everyone needs to put that into practice. I will have even an online follow-up to an in-person session where really we're coming together to reflect, how did it go? I go back, 𝗵𝗍, to the experiential learning cycle. Now that we ended the workshop, you put this into action, we're going to come back together and reflect on that experience. What did you do? How did it go? When you were asking participants more before bringing the content, we could have a follow-up, right? What did you notice? What worked well? What didn't work? What insights can we take? And just from the participants knowing that we're going to have that follow-up meeting.
Exactly. Yeah.
Oh, they put those actions into practice because they know they need to show up and reflect on it. And it can be short. It doesn't need to be long, but it definitely makes change happen.
And a great opportunity to upsell. So if you want to work with Romy, it's like 15 workshop package minimum.
Well, no, I think that's also the thing, right? Is that more, as learning designers, we do have an inherent bias that more is more. We love learning. So we love more workshops. We love more is more. But as you mentioned, we also need to work with our clients and their needs. So I'm not all about, I know it was a joke, but I am not all about 15 workshops. I would say if we can just even put from 1 into 2, that's 1 with like even a 1 hour, 1.5 hour follow-up, it's so much more impactful. And knowing the timing that works with people, not against, the moment you have 15, you lose accountability. People stop because they're like, oh, there's another one. I'll go to the next one. I'll figure it out next time. So it's finding that sweet spot.
No, I think it's great. And being an external for the last 10 years and working consultancy, like also the fact that you are external to the organization brings more, I would say, accountability. Like, I'm okay to look bad in front of my colleagues. They know I don't do stuff. But like, I really had a good impression with Romy. So maybe I will do it.
Yeah.
So yeah, works magic. And also I've seen facilitators who include it in their main offering. Like, they don't mention like, you could have a follow-up workshop. No, it's like the main session, and then we have a follow-up meeting just to make sure that it's moving forward. You're an American, I'm
I'm a
European.
New Yorker. I'm a New Yorker.
So, wow, I think there is. So I guess it means I'm cool. And not
I don't know if I will.
She's not coming from
the
Texas. She's not.
No, nothing to do with that. I don't know if I use the identity for myself at this point. American.
Sorry.
I use the identity New Yorker. It's a joke, but take it or leave it. But
no,
yes.
but I'm saying that because I know that you've been living in Europe for a while now.
Yeah.
And I think like, for me, like when you're bringing those creativity technique or something that is different of what they are used to, sometimes, you have like people that are not going to do it or don't believe in things like that. Like, oh, no, I'm not going to do that. Like, you asked me to close my eyes in front of my colleagues to listen to some music. Like, I see so many of my clients, they would never do that. And I was making this because like, I can see the difference of mindset between like US and Europe. And I'm all about that, even though it's not my style. How do you deal with that?
I should say that
you're from New York.
No, I mean, okay, anyone who listens, I know I'm going to get some kind of hate message like, you need to be a proud American. Okay, at the end of the day, you can't take the New York out of the girl. I'm always going to be, no matter that I've spent now almost 15 years living Eastern, Western, Central Europe. I've been in the States. But I would even expand this question further, because one of the things I've found, I've visited 85 countries. I've worked across 4 continents, so many different groups, cultures, religions, beliefs, approaches, you name it. I think that why I really appreciate experiential learning is because it works with the brain. And at the end of the day, everyone has their own unique brain. There's no brains that are the same, but it works with people across cultures. Again, what you dial up, what you dial down is going to be completely different across cultures. So when I've actually spent quite a bit of time living and working in India, and I always give the example that I was brought in to do a leadership workshop or exercise that this was very early on in my career, something I had done with a lot of different groups in Europe. People would fill out this questionnaire, self-reflection about your leadership approach. Some people were really quick, filled it out in 5 minutes, some people 10, some people 15. We gave it to this group of leaders in India, and we gave them an hour and a half, because I had counterparts from India who were like, you need to give time. We gave them an hour and a half, and still people came back and said there was not enough time to reflect on this. And so it was a huge lesson for me in understanding that, yes, experiential learning works across cultures, but we need to be really aware and understanding of the cultures that we're working in. So now after having those experiences, I never copy and paste and would bring to one group, demographic or group I'm working with exactly what I'm bringing from somebody else. I think it's about research, awareness, understanding what's actually going to work for participants. And you mentioned something else I think is really important. No matter what culture you're working in, challenge by choice. You need to give participants choice. It's one of our core human needs. Is we have a need for autonomy. I mean, you're a father. You see it with your kids probably. They're like, no, I can do it. I can put on my clothes. I can try. They want, that's another way we're wired. We need autonomy. And the moment that a facilitator is forcing you must have your eyes closed. You must do this. You lose out, because learning is a partnership. Everyone will know their own boundaries, what feels comfortable for them or not. My job as a facilitator is not to make sure everyone's comfortable, is to also challenge people to step out of their comfort zone, in their learning zone. But everyone will have a different barrier where that is for them. So I give choice. Even today, you can, if you want to, you can use paper. You can use colors if you want. You didn't even want to draw. You wanted to use more words. Great. Use words or images. You can, if you'd like to, close your eyes, but you're never forced. And I think remembering that at the end of the day, participants need ownership and they need choice. That can make all the difference.
Wow. Awesome, Romy.
Now I'm curious, what was the last question you didn't ask?
It was coming anyway. I was like finding a sneaky way to ask it.
Good. I'm here for it.
So before letting you go, Romy, if you could share like 3 tips to facilitators who are listening to us, like how they can level up their facilitation game by including some best practices from learning experience design, what would them be?
Yes. Okay. Let's see. Just 3. There's so many. So the first one, I'd say it always starts in learning objectives. I think we say, yeah, we know what the objectives, but really getting granular. Your experience and anything that is human-centric starts with emotion. So I always ask myself, how do I want people to feel by the end of the workshop? What is that feeling? What do I want them to know? What's the knowledge they need to be taking away? Even if, like you said, knowing what our strategic plan is, what do I want them to be able to do? Not just what they're going to do in the session, but is there a new skill that we should be developing by the end? For example, it could be this combination of knowledge, skills, and attitudes is what creates a competence. So when I think about really learning training, I really want to make sure that I'm having that attitude, emotional knowledge, and skill. We could keep it short, 3 things. Here we go. But I would say getting really intentional with your learning objectives, and really, because you can actually measure that. If you identify the right ones, you can then measure if you're doing your job or not. The second one would be weave in experiential learning. Like, please do not just come in and give content, or even don't just do as facilitators checkbox exercises. Here's my icebreaker. Here's my definition part. Here we're doing facilitators. Once you understand the process of experiential learning, you understand how the brain learns, it completely changes the way you design any session. So if that's something you want to dive into, you can always come find me. I have many courses in this. That's my shameless plug. And I'd say the third thing is just take an empathetic approach. I don't know. It's something that came up here, but I think at the end of the day, just recently with a colleague, we came up with an activity. We're like, this is going to be so cool. We're so excited. I said, wait a second. We've never done this before. Why don't you facilitate it for me? And she facilitated for me. And then I was the participant. We had a whole discussion, debrief, and said, you know, what came up here? Maybe we need to tweak that. And I think if we all just really didn't talk about empathy and human-centered design, but really did it, really tried to put ourselves in the shoes, really tried to understand what we would like or not, what we want in a session doesn't mean our participants would. So how do we really create the space or that challenge or by choice or opportunities for people to opt in or out as they need? I think that makes a huge difference. So in the spirit of making sure that we end this podcast on a more practical note to make sure we hit that acting part of the experiential learning cycle and that you, Mehdi, and anyone who's listening in can take something away and put in practice, I have a few questions to ask you as well as the listeners. So anyone who's listening, I encourage you to also answer rhetorically. So the first one, now that we've had this whole podcast, I know you might say you want to do many different things differently, but what's one thing you can pinpoint that you want to do differently for how you approach your design?
It's going to be very practical, but I want to try to be accountable buddies. I think it's very smart. I just want to see it myself.
Perfect. Okay, great. This is the what. Why? Why is it actually important to you? Because we don't know why, we lose motivation.
Yeah, I want my client to succeed. I'm doing facilitation to help people to feel useful, and I see the impact of our work. So I think it's always a pity when they don't do the things we said that we will do. So if I can increase the chance for them, like this is great.
Okay, perfect. When can you actually do it? If you think about actually looking at your calendar in a workshop that you have coming up, when might you actually bring accountability partners into that?
My next session is in 2 weeks, and it's a very short one where there will be a lot of homework. So I think this will be the best moment to try.
Okay.
I will let you know.
Do you have a particular date for that?
Yeah, I have, but it's not my work computer. I think it's the Thursday in 2 weeks. So
okay, in 2 weeks, the Thursday in 2 weeks, that's fine. Can I be your accountability partner? Can we set up a meeting? I'm serious. This is how we go. I'm going to be your partner. Can we set up a meeting so that it doesn't have to be a meeting, but like a check-in? Okay. When would be a good time to do it? The day before to make sure it's in the design, or the day? Yeah, it should be before, not after, probably, to make sure you do it. No?
Yeah, we can do it the day before.
Okay, perfect. Let's have a check-in where you tell me how you're using accountability partners. And then can you also let me know right after you do it, the impact, how you actually felt, how it worked. So I know that you definitely put it in the design, but then to see how it worked when you facilitated. How does that sound?
It sounds great. Love that, Romy.
Anything
so guys, don't kill me if I don't do it.
Wait, I have one more question. What might happen that could prevent you from bringing this into your workshop? Because we also need to look at risks that could get in the way.
But it's the end of the session, so always some surprises. But I always make sure that we have the time to end properly. So to be honest, I don't see any big ones, except then timing and a new topic that I did mention. As I said, it's a very short one, but that's why I think it's even more suitable.
Okay, great. I hear you. This often happens. Time does get in the way. I'm glad to know that you have a plan in place to make sure there's time for it. If in the worst case scenario, it happens that you run out of time to do it, what could you do maybe instead to still ensure there's some accountability for your participants?
Oh, I can reach out to the client to propose a follow-up session and then propose to maximize your chance of implementing the stuff we said we will do. Let's have a session.
Perfect.
Yeah.
That works. That's great. Now we have, what you're going to do, why it's important to you, when you're going to do it. We have a strategy in place. We're going to touch base in 2 weeks on the Thursday to tell me it's in the design, and right after to hear how it went. You know what could come up that prevents you from doing it, and you have a plan in place in case that happens. And that's how we just help increase the lever of change really occurring.
Okay.
How do you feel about it?
That's, you see, this is Romy. She practiced what she preached. She really ended up the podcast this way. No, I think this is great. And I hope that you guys are doing also the exercise based on what you've just listened.
Exactly.
I think that today we have so much information, jumping from podcast to another one, but then it's just a pity because we don't use what we just learned, and then it's gone.
Right? And then all the learning, the workshop is a waste if we don't use it. So I agree. For anyone who listened in, put your plan together. We can be your accountability partners. Send us a message on LinkedIn. Let us know what you're actually going to put into place after today to transform your workshops. And thank you all so much for listening in.
Thank you very much, Romy. It was a pleasure having you. And don't worry about your shameless plug. We'll put some information in the bio. So you got it, folks. So if you want to level up your game and learn more about learning experience design, you can definitely check the LinkedIn profile of Romy or social networks. Is there any exciting thing that you want to share with the audience? I don't know, a new course or something that is coming?
Well, lots of exciting things are coming. But as I mentioned, I'm a faculty member at the Institute for Experiential Learning. So I regularly offer our course, the Experiential Learning Trainer, that really walks through all the different aspects of facilitation, evaluation, subject matter expert, also coach how those roles show up. And of course, the experiential learning theory and applied in practice. I'm very excited that I'm going to be going even more into my own self-pace, but also many other new courses that are coming up. So everything will definitely be on LinkedIn. I post there regularly if you follow me, or just reach out. I love when people tell me, oh, I had listened to the podcast. Here's what came up. I really want to know. I got Mehdi's responses and we had this nice debrief. But if you also were able to take something away, feel free to reach out on LinkedIn and we can start new conversations there.
Yeah, love that. Just make a small post, share your emotions through the 4 songs you've listened, and then we will come back to you.
Yeah.
All right, Romy, it was a pleasure to have you. Maybe there will be a part 2 someday because there is some other question I would have loved to ask you. It was a pleasure. See you soon, and I hope you enjoy the episode. Bye-bye.
Yes, thank you so much. Appreciate it.